Okay, boys and girls, next up in my grandfather's pocket knives is this guy here. It is an ATCO knife. I don't know if that's an acronym or if it's ATCO, but yeah, here it is. Apparently made in Japan, at least it says Japan on the tang there. And if I had to guess, my grandfather got this simply because it had Japan on it. This is one of the sort of prototypical knives that I think of from the 50s, 60s, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's a Stockman shape pattern, I should say. It has 3 blades. This is a clip point blade. This here is leaf blade, I believe. And then we have a 3rd blade is a modified blade. And I don't know what the handle material is from looking it up on Google. Somebody had something similar. They thought this might be bone, pork bone, pig bone kind of thing. Yeah, it's in a little bit of rough shape. It's got this like imperfection thing here. Seems like somebody may have tried to repair it or something. So it's got a little wiggle in there, but otherwise it's a kind of solid knife. It's a little bit of wobble, not a lot of snap going on, although it does do it a little bit. Yeah, this is kind of what I think of as a sort of typical, those blades aren't too bad, typical kind of 1950s, 60s pocket knife. So, gotta do the usual, put some mineral oil on here. While I was doing this one, not a lot to talk about. It's not a 100-year-old really awesome knife or anything, as far as I know. So I thought I would kind of talk about a memory that I have of my grandfather. It's kind of wobbling a little bit there. It's not great. But yeah, so I thought, not a lot to talk about on this knife, but I thought I'd talk about my grandfather a little bit. He was a hard guy to know. It's kind of interesting. He just did not show a lot of emotion. I know a lot of people say his generation, he was, greatest generation, World War II vet. They didn't show their emotions much, but he really excelled at not showing emotion. He was very steady, didn't do much else. My other grandfather on my mother's side, they didn't talk about their feelings a lot and all that kind of stuff, but my grandfather on my mother's side at least had a little bit more life in him. He just real steady. He walked real slow, drove real slow. Back then, the speed limit in the U.S. is 55, at least in California, was it was the U.S., because I remember Nixon was talking about that, but in the U.S., on the freeways, the maximum speed limit was 55 miles an hour, and he did not go above 55 miles an hour. And by the time I was driving in the 80s, the speed limit was still 55, but everybody would drive, 70, 80. Nobody drove 55, but my grandfather did drive 55. He would not go anywhere above that. So it was kind of a running Everybody knew about that. Everybody kind of laughed about that. He would not drive above 55. And whenever driving with him, everybody would get frustrated because, you know, cars just driving past him, left, right, and center. He never went above the speed limit. And the same thing with walking. He would always be, everybody else would walk, and he would walk real slow, not sort of as a way of rebelling or anything like that. He just was a slow walker and slow driver, and he wasn't going to hurry up for anybody. And he didn't particularly get mad about it. He just walked slow and drove slow, and that was it. So it's kind of a funny thing. Everybody kind of knew him as that. And yeah, he just did his thing, didn't care what people said. Walked slow, drove slow, and if he didn't like it, didn't bother him. He would still do whatever he was going to do. I always, growing up with him, I always just thought that was funny. And part of my rebellious streak is kind of like that. Like I said, I don't think he was rebellious. But my rebellious sort of nature kind of loved that he just did not care. Whatever, he's going to walk slow. He didn't care what anybody else was going to do. And me and him got along in that way. I didn't really expect him to be other than what he was. And he just was what he was. My father and him did not have a very good relationship. He was a pretty serious guy. He was what he was when he's my grandfather, which made him pretty endearing to me. But when he was a father, apparently he was real serious, real hard on my dad. And when he got in trouble, he would take the belt to him and stuff, which was in those days pretty normal, I think, but certainly didn't make my father like him very much, and which is ironic because my father would do that to me. And I didn't have that great of a relationship with my father, but my grandfather and I had a pretty good relationship, but only because I didn't expect a whole lot from him, and I didn't see him a whole lot. So couple visits a year. He lived in Northern California and I lived in Southern California, but when I did see him, I always just thought he was kind of a funny guy that did his own thing, and I just accepted him for who he was. So I didn't put a lot of pressure on him, and I think he appreciated that. So we weren't good buddies or anything, but and I mentioned this in other videos, he seemed to like me a lot, would give me a hug every once in a while, which he never did with my dad. And I kind of feel like my father got a little bit resentful of that fact. Family issues are never fun. But yeah, that was my grandfather. He just did what he's going to do. As far as I can tell, that was who he was his entire life. He just did what he's going to do, and if he liked it, it didn't bother him. If he didn't like it, it didn't bother him. If he liked it, it didn't bother him. So I remember, as far as these pocket knives go, when I would go up to visit him, I'd be up there for like a week maybe. And when I first got there, he would take him out of the knife rolls. Only if I asked him, say, "Hey, Grandpa, let me check out the pocket knives." So, "Okay, Kenny, here you go." He would roll them out, and take out a couple. And I'd look at them for a few minutes. Be like, "Oh, that's cool." And then we would be like, "All right, that's about it." And put them back away, and that would be it as far as the pocket knives go. I liked my grandfather. We didn't bond. It wasn't like this great thing between us. I'd left him alone. I liked him, and I liked, all the stuff that I just mentioned were all true. But we didn't write letters to each other or, things like that. It's just kind of one of those things. And then he passed away when he was 82. I was 96. Yeah, I spent a little bit of time in the Air Force when I got out in 93. So he passed away when I was in school and went to college after that, and he passed away and had a little service at a local church, basically just his family. We all said goodbye. And that was it. That was way back in 96. So, yeah, he would talk a little bit about his past. We didn't really get into childhood. Every time he would kind of let loose, that would always crack me up. One time he would tell me about how when my grandmother, when he first met her, boy, she was a looker. And he would give a little twinkle in his eye and smile. And anytime something like that would happen, it was just so rare that it would just, oh God, I would just laugh. I'd be like, Grandpa. He met my grandmother. I forget how old he was, but he was 10 years older than her. And that was raised a few eyebrows that he was so old, which is also ironic because my wife is 10 years younger than me. So it ripples through history, I guess. And when I talked to my grandmother about what attracted her to him, she said, well, he owned a horse, and that was pretty big time in those days. And that, of course, sent me into all sorts of laughter. I thought that was hilarious. And, I wouldn't exactly call their marriage a love story for the ages. It was kind of started from there, and they, back in those days, they just did their thing. I kind of feel like love and all that was a bit of a secondary, at least in their case, a bit of a secondary thing. They loved each other enough to stay together their whole entire lives. That snaps a little bit better. But yeah, that was kind of general overview of my grandfather. Real serious guy, but every once in a while would cut loose. And every once in a while, I would say once every 6 months, he would kind of give a smile and laugh about something. And as he got older, those times were more and more frequent. Yeah. Another famous thing he would do is when you ever talk to him on the phone, I don't think I ever talked to him on the phone longer than about 30 seconds. He would say, how you doing? I would say, good, how are you doing? And he would say, just fine, okay, bye. And he would get off the phone, and everybody would laugh about that. So that was him. So there you go. ATCO or ATCO Japan 3-blade pocket knife. Plus getting to know my grandfather. All right. Until next time.